What's up everybody, it's Drew Wilkins with Swine and Bovine Barbecue, and in today's video I'm going to show you how I made this absolutely delicious, barky, juicy, rendered fatty brisket. Let's get going. The first thing you need to do to cook a good brisket is get a quality brisket. This is actually a Wagyu from Costco. I normally go prime. Wagyu, in my opinion, is overboard and not needed, but my Costco was slim pickings. The prime briskets were either scalped or they were 16, 17, 18 plus pounds. So went with the Wagyu. I like to get something between 10 and 14 pounds. This was a little over 12 pounds, but it's a good looking brisket. It's got a little bit of a thin fat cap right here, but the pickings were thin and this was the best looking one, and I didn't feel like driving all over the place trying to find one. So this is the brisket we're gonna cook today. So there's a few key steps when you're trimming a brisket. The first is removing this decal fat, and this is what I cut into to remove the cryovac. This is pure fat. It kind of peels away as you see me doing here. So the first thing we want to do is get rid of it. It's unrenderable, massive piece of fat, pure fat. This is a small one on this one, and a lot of times if you go to a barbecue joint, you'll see them, the first cut they make is actually, the first cut separate the flat, which is this muscle, from the point, which is the fattier muscle, and it's on top, and that's what the decal fat kind of separates here, a little seam fat. They'll cut it off, and then you'll see them get flipped over, cut right here, and slide something off the cutting board. That's the decal fat. So I don't want to have to do that. That's why I go ahead and remove it. So we got the decal fat removed. Gonna clean up this underside a little bit. I'm not too worried about what the underside looks like, but there's big pockets of fat like this, I'll just go ahead and remove it. This backside is looking good enough for me, so let's flip it over. The next thing I like to do is kind of take this mohawk down. This has already been trimmed a decent amount, so there's not a lot to do on this one. I am gonna take it down a bit here, but this right here is unprotected lean. So on this one, we don't want that. We want a 1/4 inch of fat all the way around where fat's possible. On the point, you can get away with a little less just because it is so fatty, but this right here is not gonna do us any favors. So I'm gonna trim this down real quick. So don't worry, this will all go to sausage. Next step is there's a little thick band of fat right here. So if you kind of push down on it, you can kind of see the seam right here that runs through. Look at all that fat right there. So that's a good starting point. We'll just get it level with the seam that I created. And if you want to see more in-depth process of how I trim, I'll leave it linked above, so you can click on that, save it to watch later. That's the full in-depth process on how I like to trim a brisket. We're just going to continue to get rid of this fat, get down to a 1/4 inch. Always happens. Can't get away without scalping a brisket. We're thinner over here on this point than we are on this backside. We want to make this about as thick as this. That'll prevent it from curling up. It'll also help prevent pooling, which is when liquid pools up around this area of the brisket. When that happens, I also find it increasingly difficult to get that area of the brisket tender. So we want to avoid that if at all possible. So what we're gonna do is about right there. It's about the same thickness as there. So we're gonna make a nice little cut, kind of like that. So here we go. Again, this meat won't be wasted. It's going to sausage. All right, so our brisket is done. We trimmed off a little more than I would have liked to on this side. We didn't take a whole lot on this back side here, but due to the way this mohawk was and some of this hard fat, we took it down more than I typically would like to, but that's all right. It'll help us out in the long run. For seasoning, I like to go with 50-50 kosher salt and coarse black pepper. So we're gonna go on with a nice, pretty healthy amount, even coating. Then on top of that, go on with a 50-50 mix of granulated garlic and granulated onion. Just a nice little smooth, even layer. Not too much, but enough to know it's there. Flip it over, repeat the process. So our brisket is trimmed in season, ready to go. I've got it on a wire rack. I'll put it in the fridge overnight, just like this, uncovered. That way when we wake up in the morning, there's no trimming, seasoning to do. It's already done. We'll fire up the pit and put it on. So we'll see you in the morning when it's time to fire up the pit. The following morning, our pit is fired up, cruising along between 225 and 250, which is exactly where we want it. So let's place our brisket on the pit. We're gonna let this brisket cruise along between 225 and 250 for the next several hours, probably 5-6 hours. After that, I'll bump the tip up between 250 to 275 until we finish it off. But I'll check in with you every couple of hours. That way you can see what the brisket's doing as it continues to cook, what it starts to look like, just to take you through the entire process of how I cook a brisket. 3 hours in and our brisket is looking fantastic. Decided to check in every 3 hours instead of 2 because that'd be a lot of checking in. But we're getting a nice dark red color here on the bottom, which is perfect. The fat cap is starting to brown up a little bit, or yellow up in this case. Everything's looking really good. We don't have any pooling. That's one thing we want to watch for. If we do get some pooling, we'll probably put some foil tips around the edges here. This edge is a little sharp, so I'll probably do it anyways in order for, there's a little overhang here due to the trim. I must have been at a little angle on this bottom side, so I may do that just to protect the edges, and I might put some foil up front or a blocking log. But right now, everything's looking great. This is exactly how we want it to look 3 hours in. So we're gonna shut it down, check back in 3 hours. We are 6 hours into this brisket cook, and so far it's looking fantastic. We're getting a great dark color. It's temping around 155, 157. So we're getting right towards that point of the stall. So I pushed the temp up to 275. That way we can push through that stall nicely. We are getting some lift under the brisket right here. If you recall, I was a little worried about that area. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna tip it with foil. And that just simply means we're gonna wrap this little edge right here with foil. It's sticking out a little bit, and that heat's coming through here like a wind tunnel. The firebox is over here, the stack is over here, so the heat has to escape one way. There's just a little crack in the door, so the easiest way for it to escape is to go through the cook chamber real fast and find its way to the smokestack to get out quickly. So this side was sticking out a little bit. I am gonna rotate the brisket to where it's just straight now. We're nice and straight, and then to prevent this front end from getting too crispy, there is a fat cap on it and it feels really good. I'm not overly worried about it, but I am gonna put just a blocking log in here. And what that'll do is it'll still get heat, still get great color, but it'll prevent the direct heat source that's flowing through the cook chamber from just hitting this head on, and can create some shredded slices when it comes time to cut that point. Let's shut it down and talk about this stage of the cook. This stage of the cooking process can be a little daunting for the home or backyard cook. So when you enter the stall, it's around 160 to 165, and the brisket does not maintain the temperature climb that it had prior in the cook. I remember the first time I cooked a brisket, I think I got to 100 degrees in like an hour or hour and a half, and I thought that, I don't know what people are talking about. It takes 12 to 16 hours to cook a brisket. This thing is gonna be done in no time flat. I was definitely wrong. It took that 12 to 16 hours. I don't remember exactly how long it cooked, but it definitely took a lot longer than I thought it was. And I think the easiest way to explain why the brisket does stop going up in temperature is think about your body. When you're doing activities or getting hot, it sweats to keep your temperature down. Well, that's what the brisket's doing. It's tightening up its muscles, and it's getting rid of excess moisture or water, which is what we want it to do. But due to the fact that it's getting rid of it, much like our body keeps us at a consistent temperature, it's prohibiting the brisket from rising in temperature as fast as it did until it got to that point. So there's an old saying in home brewing from Charlie Papazian, and it's relax, don't worry, have a home brew. And I think that definitely translates into barbecue. Relax, maintain your temperatures, give it the time it needs, and your brisket will push through the stall with no issues. That said, talking about beer, making me want one, so I'm gonna go grab one. 9 hours in, and let's see how our brisket is doing. It's looking fantastic. We've got a dark bark, which is exactly what we want. If you touch it, it's starting to get a little squishy. Feeling good. The point is still nice and soft, which is awesome. This blocking log is doing its job. The fat is feeling nice and squishy. So it's got some fantastic color. The bark is feeling pretty set, but we're still at about in the mid 160s, right? We talked about the stall. We're experiencing it 3 hours and we've only gone up roughly 10 degrees. So relax, we're gonna let this keep going. Once it gets closer to 175, 180, it'll be time to wrap. But until then, we're gonna let her keep cooking. 12 hours in and it is time to wrap our brisket. It's feeling nice and soft on the fat cap, still nice and soft on the tip of the point as well. So our blocking log did its job. So let's pull it, wrap it, then we'll put it back on the pit. We're gonna go with the foil boat method to wrap this brisket. I've become a huge fan of it. To do it, I'm sure you guys have seen it through Evan Leroy or Chud. They're the ones that popularized this. So what we're gonna do is just twist up on the outside and work our way around. There we go, it's that easy. Let's go put it back on the pit. Our brisket is back on the pit. I have the flat pointed towards the firebox right now. The flat is what we need to continue cooking. It's about 180 degrees right now. That's when I like to wrap, so that's why I wrapped it at this point. But the point, it's probably tender. We could eat it and have a great time with it, but the flat is still tough. So that is what needs to get tender. We got it facing towards the firebox. We got rid of the blocking log. We don't need it. Foil's doing all our work now, so we're shut this down. We'll come back when it's nice and tender. 13.5 hours later and our brisket is finally done. It's probing tender. The underside, I can barely poke my finger through it and it's feeling fantastic. Probing like butter. It's 203-ish, 205-ish, depending on where you poke it. But it's feeling absolutely fantastic. So we're gonna pull this. I'm gonna put it on a wire rack, let it rest until it comes down to 140, which will take 1.5 to 2 hours probably. I'll vent this a little, so I'll sit this back, that way it's not completely enclosed in the foil. But we'll let it come down to 140, and then my oven actually goes to 140, so I'll put it in the oven at 140 overnight. If you don't have an oven that goes to 140, put it at 170. It's not gonna make a massive difference, so don't worry about that. This bad boy's done. We'll see you in the morning. Our brisket had a nice 12-hour overnight rest. It's time to slice into it. Let's see how it looks. All right, get her out of the foil boat here. Feeling nice and tender. Dump this fat and juices right over the top. Get it all nice and pretty. Let's slice into it. Moment of truth. So when we slice this, we want to keep the point separate from the flat. So this is right about in the middle here. Slice in here that crunchy bark. Yeah, looks pretty good. Nice and juicy. See the juice running out. Look at this side. Yeah, that's looking good. Nice rendered yellowish fat right there, which is what we're looking for. That's one of the reasons when we're pushing on the fat, when we're seeing whether or not it's time to wrap, we want it to be squishy. And when it's squishy like that, and if you push in on it a little bit and look in, like this right here, when you push in and see, I'm not sure how well that's showing up, but that's yellow. That's what you want to see, and that's what we're testing for before we wrapped it when we were pushing on the fat. I'm gonna go ahead and cut into this side. Little burn-in pieces here. Nicely rendered fat. Let's cut a couple another slice off here. Lost a little bark, that's all right. Whew, that's looking good to me. Nicely rendered, yellow fat up top, nice thin layer of it. It's exactly what we want to see. Slide this off to the side. I've got it on the cutting board like this so it doesn't oxidize, sitting in some of its own fat. Truthfully, this right here is my favorite slice, so I'm gonna cut off a slice right here to try. Yeah, that looks good. The bin test, nice and floppy, holds up under its own weight. The wait is over a day's or 2 days worth of work, because we trimmed 2 evenings ago. We cooked it yesterday, had a long overnight rest, but now we're ready to dig in. So first, I'm gonna try one of these burn-in pieces here. Always a good place to start. Cheers. That's incredible. It is tender, barky. You get the crunchiness from the bark from the foil boat method. So it's not getting softened up like it would in a paper wrap that we see a lot. The crunchy bark, I mean, if you can hear it, is unreal. I love it. I think it is a game changer for brisket. I much prefer it over softer bark these days. And I still cook paper wrap briskets every now and then because we're backyard cooks. It's fun to switch things up. I'm not trying to make the Texas Monthly Top 50 list. I don't have to have a consistent product over and over again. I like to mix things up, so sometimes I paper wrap. Sometimes I season differently. Lowry's obviously is a big thing these days, so sometimes I'll use Lowry. Sometimes I'll use 2-to-1 pepper to salt and just coat the heck out of it, Leroy and Lewis style. And this is a fantastic bark, but theirs is even better because of the way that they season it. It's fun to switch things up as a backyard cook, so don't get stuck in one way of doing things. The more you switch it up, the more you learn, the more you figure out what you like. And that's kind of how I came to this conclusion, that I do prefer a foil boat brisket because I've tried several different methods. The only one that I haven't tried is a foil wrap, full foil wrap, so I'm gonna have to do that soon. That way I can say I've tried a lot. But yeah, don't be afraid to switch things up. We do things for fun. We're in the backyard. Don't feel like you gotta cook the brisket the exact same way every single time. I love mixing it up. It's what I love doing. So let's go ahead and try a piece off this fatty here. Really good. Tender, barky. You get the salt. You get a little bit of that granulated onion and garlic in there as well. I love that addition. Let's go ahead and, whoops, lost our onions. Let's try our in-between slice here. So that's got lean right here and fatty up top. Let's see how this is tasting. My favorite bite off a whole brisket. And you can't tell me that there's a better bite on the brisket than that. I love fatty. It's fantastic. I love the burn ends. But the combination of the lean and the fatty on top with that seam fat running through it, I absolutely love. Hard to beat that. Well, let's get a slice of pure lean. Going for about 1/4 inch slices all the way around everything we cook. So we've got just a little lean here. Very tender. That one's not passing the bend test, so very tender. Better than it being too tough though. So let's try this sucker out, if we can get it together. So obviously it was super tender. Don't want it to fall apart like that, so maybe went a little over. Oh well, it's better than it being too tough. But it was still full of flavor, wasn't dry, and yeah, I've got no complaints about that other than it didn't hold together very well. But that said, let's make my absolute favorite thing to do with brisket, and that's a fold over. So we're gonna take one of these in-between slices right here, and we're gonna place it on top of a piece of white bread, take us some onion slices, and then take a big old bite. In my mind, in barbecue, it does not get better than that. An in-between slice on white bread with some onions. So that's gonna do it for this video. And if there's a theme that I would stick to when it comes to cooking briskets is, one, like I said yesterday, relax. Don't worry too much about it. Your brisket's gonna be done when it's done. Don't get stuck to guidelines or temperatures. If it's not tender, then it doesn't really matter what the temperature is. Cook it until it's tender. Now, judging by the flat, we may have gone a little beyond that, but I'd rather have a flat that's too tender than one that is too tough. So just relax, enjoy the process, make sure you have fun when you're doing it, make sure you relax while you're doing it. But remember, relax, don't worry, have a beer, give it the time it needs, and your brisket is gonna turn out great. But thanks for watching this video. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, please hit that subscribe button. If you cook anything I make on my channel, feel free to tag me on Instagram. My handle is @SwineandBovineBBQ. And if you have any suggestions for what you want to see me cook next, please leave it in the comments down below. But thanks for watching. Go out there, cook a brisket, have some fun. We'll see you in the next one.